So hello and welcome to today's SCOPE webinar featuring Arctic co-production of knowledge, NASA and the Yukon. So we are hosting this talk today with respect and gratitude on the traditional territories of the Kwanlundun First Nation and Tonquechon Council. My name is Monique Chatterton and I am the Science Policy Advisor working with the Office of the Science Advisor for the Yukon Government. The Senior Science Advisor, Sabrina Kinsella, is also in attendance today. So I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today. So Dr. Kimberley Miner is a climate scientist and program manager at the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. Her research on climate risks has taken her to the planet's extreme environments from the North Pole to Antarctica and Mount Everest. Dedicated to science communication, Kimberley's research teams have reached international audiences with features in the BBC, NYT, Sports Illustrated, GQ, Comic-Con, and a 2020 Guinness World Record. Before coming to NASA, Kimberley worked on climate security for the Department of Defense in DC and currently teaches her work at Berkeley and Virginia Tech. She's also writing a book on how younger generations can plan for climate change, to be released in early 2024. Kimberley is a black belt wilderness firefighter and lives in a fishing harbor on the Pacific Ocean. So Kimberley, I will turn the floor over to you for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Monique. I'm always a little embarrassed when we read the bio. I feel like I should always shorten it, but I appreciate you all bearing with me. Part of the benefit of having a really small group today is I'd really love to go through the presentation and then open it up for discussion and feedback and thoughts and make it a little bit more collaborative if possible, if folks are able to stick around. Probably don't have too long of a presentation. I think I've got about 20 minutes worth. So hopefully we can do all the chatting together that we want to do and still give you back some of your lunch time. All right. Oh, just 1 second, let me fix that. All right, cool. So as you heard, I'm Kimberley. I see a bunch of names that I know, so thank you all so much for coming. It's nice to see everybody. I hope you're all staying warm. It's raining here, and my little doggo is snoring in the corner, so it's a little bit cozy, which is nice. Today, I'm going to be sharing some of the work that we've been doing since the summer. And I'll just put the bottom line up front. This is what they made us do in the military. I find that it's kind of useful. Just a reminder that across scales, collaboration is always important. And that's something that organizations like NASA are starting to really realize, I think, in a more gut way. So that's a big priority for a number of us. And that includes prioritizing good relationship building equally with retrieving, if you will, data across scales. So the above data has been working in progress for about 10 years. And it's a great resource, but without partnerships and interaction with data user communities, there's not as much benefit to really anyone. And that does include NASA. NASA is a federal government organization. And what that basically means is that we have to provide all of the data for free to whoever wants to use it. And that's part of our mission. So this is an effort that myself and Polar and specifically Paul McCartney really focused on this summer to make sure that everyone who would like the data is getting it. So as you all know, Arctic change is totally unprecedented. This is a map from a paper that Adrienne Foster just put together with her team and kind of going over some of the emerging disasters, disturbances across the Arctic, and you can kind of see it's pretty wide ranging, right? We've got fire, we've got bark beetle. There's some very, very important and highly impactful things that are changing across scales. And when we're thinking about the way to look at Arctic change, I'm thinking about not only in situ, which is doing work on the land, all the way through to towers that stay long term and are able to monitor greenhouse gases, to airborne, and then satellite. And one of the satellites that we're working on, the surface biology and geology satellite, will hopefully be an increasing resource. And I know the Europeans are also putting a number of satellites into orbit that are going to be looking specifically at the Arctic. So we'll have more and more data, hopefully soon. I know it's a little bit behind where we need to be, but it will be better soon. What we're going to be talking about today is airborne, because that's what the above campaign does, the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment. And that looks at both in situ data, so again, doing things on the ground, on the land, and then using remote sensing, what we call UAVSAR or AVRIS-NG. It's basically a visible infrared spectrometer, and I'll show you some of the products from that in a little bit. This is what the plane looks like. So we're looking at a 5-meter spatial resolution, which is way better than what we can do with satellites. In the US, there's also regulations around what satellites can retrieve and without being a security risk. So the 3-letter agencies monitor things underneath 30 meters. And so what this basically means is that we have to use an airplane if we want to get better spatial resolution on data from the sky. And because so many things are changing in the Arctic and there's a lot of forecasting that's going on, it's really difficult to get a full understanding without this variety of scales. And that includes everything from tundra greenness, whether the Arctic is browning or greening, all the way to ungulate range change over time. But there are really severe challenges in forecasting the changes over different time scales, over different spatial scales, whether it's seasonal trends, whether it's abrupt thaw on a local level, the altered structure and hydrology of the landscape. It's just this enormous challenge to get an understanding of what the Arctic is looking like right now, what it looked like in the distant past, and what it looked like in the future. But luckily, we have, as a human population, a bunch of people who have been living in the Arctic since time immemorial, who are able to share stories and data with us over their time period. So it has become very clear to NASA over the last few, let's say, decades, that the level of engagement that we have done with Indigenous nations, First Nations, local residents, regional governments is not sufficient. And so this was part of one of the efforts that we are making this summer to remedy that, if you will, and engage with folks in the Yukon. Part of what we were thinking about was co-producing science needs and results. So basically what that means is not putting one form of knowledge above another, not thinking that the data that NASA has been generating since the 60s is somehow better than the hundreds up to thousands of years of data that local residents have been aware of, collecting and observing. And then also co-monitoring any activities that happen, right? So like I wouldn't go to my friend's house and move around a bunch of furniture without asking. So I absolutely wouldn't do the same thing with any kind of research on the ground. And again, just really equally valuing all different kinds of knowledge and science. So in the Yukon, some of the things that I've been thinking about include proprietary data. So what does it look like to own knowledge? And, and that includes intellectual property. So sharing stories, sharing experiences, and how that still needs to be maintained. A friend of mine here is also building some very cool server farms for the DNA. Thinking about the way that you can contain different information, not only in individuals, but also in technological mainframes, whether that's importing written things or sharing stories in different formats. And part of what I've been thinking about is how the NASA information could benefit the community so that it's not, a one way where we're coming in and we're saying, hey, come check our data and see if this feels right to you guys, but instead really trying to build relationships and friendships that allow the ability to share knowledge. And I've been very privileged in this way. I was just speaking with Brian from Champaign-Ajax this morning, and I think that people have been very, very kind and lovely in the Yukon, and I've been very privileged to develop some lovely friendships. Part of the other thing that I am trying to think about, believe it or not, while I'm sitting here lecturing to you, is if everyone is allocated equal time, their comments and their thoughts and their presence are allocated equal space and weight. In a paper that we're putting together, one of the graduate students on the paper, Jared, was commenting about how Indigenous forms of knowledge can often be more holistic and include observations, oral histories, and years of knowledge. So thinking about, the history of Western science in the Arctic and how it can be, up to even 200 years, and how that's really quite a considerable short amount of time. So after all of our meetings this summer, I was able to generate some requests and some data products that were needed. That includes everything from flight lines, so flying our airplane in areas that people need the information, vegetation mapping, snow mapping. You can kind of see the list here on the left. I don't need to read it to you. And then some deliverables. So the synthesis document is mostly what we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, ongoing partnership and consultation. We are lucky to be able to have our science team meeting in January in San Diego. So we've got a bunch of folks who are coming down from the Yukon to warm up a little bit and sit and talk science with us, and I'm looking forward to that very much. And then put in a comment into one of the journals, and that's just the beginning of this kind of conversation that I'm trying to make sure is highlighted, not only, with you all and not only with NASA, but with kind of the Western science narrative in general, and making sure that we are starting as a Western science community to think about doing things, the right way and putting good relationships first. Okay. So I'm excited to show you some of the maps that my friend and colleague, Latha Baskaran, has put together. We've already shown these to Champagne-Ajac and Kulani First Nations and got some more requests. So I'll show you in sequential order. This is the 2014 map that she put together to kind of give an understanding of what the land cover looked like. Now, you're like, 2014, that's, believe it or not, almost 10 years ago. Ouch. But the reason that we pulled that is because that was the best data she was able to find, but obviously not that useful. So we went back to the drawing board to try and figure out what else was available. And so she was able to then find a 2020 land cover map. This is actually from the Government of Canada resources and remote sensing. So we'll probably end up putting a bunch of different things together, but I wanted to give you kind of an understanding of what from our meetings with, Yukon government and with folks across the Yukon, we've already been kind of working about, thinking about, and generating. And then all of the maps I'm going to show you are kind of a starting point for us and for all of us to be thinking about change. And then I'm going to write up some 2-pagers, some take-homes, what our understanding of it looks like from the maps. And then the idea is for folks to be able to bring their in situ and land-based knowledge in, and then we can kind of make a beautiful perspective on what's going on across scales. Okay, back to our maps. So this is a tree canopy cover from 2020. We do have a fire overlay that Latha is going to put on eventually, and that'll be really nice to see how the tree canopy cover and the fire maps overlap or don't overlap, and kind of the implications for that, and see if there's anything that we can pull out as far as trends. This one I thought was really cool looking. She's got a couple different permafrost maps that we were able to pull, and Latha has made all these maps for me and for us, and it's been a really big privilege to have her do so. She's an absolute whiz with GIS. So she wasn't able to join us today, but has been coming to these talks a lot recently, just to make it clear that she's also very invested. And I apologize she can't join us today. This is cool. This needs to be reformatted a little bit. We just got this together yesterday, but you can see the fraction of permafrost maps, and it's not a percentage as in forecast. This is an actual, like, what we believe to be known percentage, but you can see the way that it kind of is disparate across the landscape. So the other request from CAFN was more of like a GIF. And so this is something that Phil Broderick put together for us for California, for Santa Barbara. And it kind of shows you over a season from February right through May. You can see at the bottom right here the way that the trees and grasses change over time. You can kind of, this is very complicated and wiggle matching, but on the left side here, you can see that the landscape visibly changes with the infrared spectrometer over time. So what we're going to try to do is put the 2014 through 2020 maps and data into this kind of GIF so that you can actually see the landscape visibly change over time. And I'm hoping it works because it would be so cool. And we're happy to share all of this with anybody that would find it useful or has requests as well. I'm really hoping that as soon as I'm done, very soon, we can chat a little bit about folks' take homes, thoughts, and if there's anything that we can do differently. So some of the guiding thoughts for Above and the Yukon, I have been doing some reading and talking and thinking. This comes from Max Liberon from a paper they published in 2021. I'll go ahead and read it to you. I'm pulling on my anthropology legs here. Colonialism is not a historical event, but an ongoing set of relations that still characterize the common sense of professional science. As more scientists come to realize that science has power relations that do not serve all people equally, we are left trying to understand how we might change the way science is done. Treat Indigenous knowledge as expertise rather than culture. Cite us. Pay us as experts when you need us in your classrooms and panels. Talk to us before you complete a grant application as full collaborators rather than as unfunded additions at the end. This work would not have been possible without a huge number of people, and a lot of you are on this call, so I really appreciate that very, very much. And I appreciate everything that you all have done to make this possible, all of your kindness, all of your generosity of time and of spirit. And I am just so blessed to have had all of you as part of my year this year. I've been starting to think about how things wrap up, you know, as we are in December and in the holiday season. So really grateful to have the time to spend with you all and wrap it up together and start thinking about what next steps look like. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that great talk. I want to open up the floor for questions. So just going to see if sometimes they come in on the chat, so I'll take a look to see if I missed anything. Okay, nope. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I have a question, so I can get us started. Kimberly, I was curious about the role of different types of data collection, like weather monitoring stations, and how does collecting that type of data work with your like your in situ collection that you mentioned, where you're doing flights and things like that? How do all those data sets work together?
So the way that Above is set up is we're kind of like the umbrella. NASA is the umbrella. And then there's a bunch of different research teams that are part of it that focus on different things. We're just about to enter phase 3 in January. And so there's a new wildlife group that's going to be thinking about different changes there. And then I think there's another changeover scales group thinking about the way that vegetation changes. And so things like weather stations would be direct inputs for their research, and different groups would use it in different ways. So I guess it's a really important and strong supplement to the work that everyone is doing using all the different types of data.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions?
Looks like Brandon said, hey, Brandon, no worries that you got here late. I'm wondering if the data is available for others to use and how it can be accessed. And absolutely, it's available for others to use. I can put the link for Above on the chat here, but then also let me know If you are interested in getting the data and not able to process it, it's really, really hard to deal with the way that NASA stores its data. A friend of mine is trying really hard to start reforming that, but you have to download separate project programs and you have to run it in a separate portal. So it's a little bit complicated. So do let me know. And you can find my contact information pretty easily online, but I'm on all the social medias as well. You can just send me a message.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
Okay.
we're just kind of interested in it in regards to forest inventory information, kind of the cost scale of the Yukon. So yeah, I'll get in contact. Thanks.
Sorry, what did you say? What inventory information?
Forest inventory.
Oh, okay. Well, that should be quite easy. And then that's part of the inputs we're using for the maps. So I could also just potentially give you the data that we just processed, and then you would just be able to use it however you want.
Okay, awesome.
Here,
Thanks
I'll
very
just
much.
put my email in the chat and then you can just have it. Thanks for the question. Anybody, oh yeah, I see a hand.
Yeah, Richard, I think that's you. Yeah.
Hey, hi Kimberley.
Hey.
Did you listen to the talk Scope did last week, was it? I'm trying to think of the name. Is it Kirsten that gave the talk on habitat changes?
Did I listen to it?
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, I'm not on the mailing list, believe it or not. I should probably put myself on the mailing list. So no, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance.
Sure, Mike can do that. It was really interesting in how grasslands were going to start. Well, they predicted grasslands are going to start coming up central southern border of the Yukon, and how it's going to throw forests into a complete disarray. Different types of wood moving, different types of forests moving north, kind of thing.
Who was it you said that had given the talk? Kristen something?
Kristen.
Kristen, yeah, it's Kristen Reed, and there is a recording of the presentation. I can share that with you if you're interested.
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
it would be interesting to see.
Well, it's fascinating. There seems to be a lot of overlap with what you're doing with Kirsten, to be honest.
Yeah, she was looking at patterns of vegetation change in the Yukon. So that, yeah, that could be interesting for you, and maybe an interesting collaboration as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, I really appreciate that. Thanks for bringing it up, and apologies for not making the talk.
It's okay. That's why we record them.
Yeah. All right.
Can you pop your presentation up? There was a page where you were looking on the left-hand side. It had all the data sets you were trying to pull together.
Yeah, and this is just
is that just a sample of it?
Yeah, this is just a sample of what folks
gotcha.
requested. So this is not the full hold on. This is not the full request, but this is a subset, if you will.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. I was going to ask you how you decided on that little lot.
Oh, this is not from me. This is the meetings that Paul and I did over the summer, and getting all the feedback from folks about what would be useful. And so then I put it by subgroup into our matrix, and then we've been asking people, and are going to continue in January, to ask people what they have that we can use as inputs in addition to any of the satellite imagery that's already publicly available.
Okay. Just wondering whether highways would have a good idea of permafrost distribution along the main highways.
Permafrost distribution along the highways?
Well, they know where all the roads are failing. You only have to drive the damn things to know where they've gone.
Well, yeah, luckily we have a ton of really great permafrost maps. This is just one example. I can stop sharing and pull them up real quick. We were able to pull, I think, 4 just from what was already available. So I think the permafrost distribution is pretty well mapped. Let me show you what else.
But it's changing fast. That's the thing.
Well, that's the problem, right? So then it's, we have, and then you have to look at the time period over what it's mapped on.
Yeah.
Just a second, let me pull this up for you as well.
And as an engineer, I'm interested in permafrost in the main centers of population.
So here is one of them. This is, I guess, modeled permafrost is what we pulled. And then this is, oh, I I don't think it's showing you both. All right, let me close it. And then this is permafrost probability. So remember that we just pulled these and put them, she put them together on Wednesday. So what I probably will do is do an overlay of all the different kind of permafrost information and then see where we can get the highest probability and then derive it that way. And then put that forward. Same thing with a lot of the landscape features. We'll probably just overlay everything until we get the full information. It'd be great for us to create like one big pretty map and then be able to share that with everybody who wants it, in addition to, you know, the words and the write-up.
Has any investigations been done more concentrated in Alaska that show how the permafrost is moving around?
For sure. Yeah. I'm just focusing on the Yukon, but we do a lot of work in Alaska with my groups. I know there are a lot of people doing work in Alaska. And then I know that the Tanana Chiefs Conference region is the largest conference, and they also have a really strong science department. So I think it is being covered for sure.
Interesting to see whether that can be applied across Yukon and Northwest Territories as a use that knowledge of how things are changing to predict where things are going to be going in the Yukon.
Yes, for sure. And I do think there are people using hydrologic models. Merit Turetsky at CU Boulder, her group is doing a lot on abrupt thaw and the different dynamics that are driving thaw. So I think there's really, really good people who are working on that. I'm not incorporating that right now into the maps, but it's possible to potentially do like an overlay of thermal dynamics probably pretty easily with one of the satellites that's on the International Space Station. So I think that's definitely worth thinking about. And you bring up an excellent point.
Yeah, interesting. So many climate models, as Mike was inferring, and none of them seem to agree, other than it's going to go crazy in this neck of the woods.
Yeah, climate models are challenged right now. We need a breakthrough.
Yeah. But permafrost is one of the things, inputs as well, and the amount of lake coverage, or I don't know whether they're called lakes or ponds or what, but the amount of surface water, and if that starts draining off, how that plays games with the climate models and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, you know. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming.
Good luck with it, Kimberley.
Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Also happy to take any feedback, suggestions, anything like that as well, in addition to questions.
I was curious about, I think you had said that you talked to Champagne-Asiac First Nations, and they had suggested that you create like GIF-like representations of the Yukon data. Is that, did I hear that correctly? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you intending on doing that with, say, like the permafrost distribution, showing over time how that's changed? Do we have data that would support something like that?
Probably not to both. I think the one that we really would have the best data for is the vegetation mapping, because we've got 2014 up through present. I think for the permafrost, I mean, I think the really just unfortunate reality about, you know, the tools, the Western science tools, is that we don't really have that much data over that much time. And there hasn't been a real articulated political need until pretty recently. So there hasn't been as much funding for satellites that could do things like that. So probably not for change for permafrost over time. I think it would be very difficult to find the data. It's a great idea, but I don't think we're going to be able to find that, unfortunately.
Oh, too bad. Yeah. Guess we have to work with what we have. Yeah. Oh, Sabrina has a question.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Hey.
This may or may not be your wheelhouse, but we met with some contacts from Statistics Canada when we were in Ottawa recently, and they were talking about doing a census of the environment for Canada. So trying to map out ecosystem characteristics. I don't know what kind of granularity across the country, and they were noting that they don't have a lot of data sources for the north. So I did point them in the direction of Libby, so that you may hear from them anyway. But I just wondered, from your perspective, is the data that comes out of the above program suitable for something like that, to fill in some gaps for something like this, a census of the environment?
Yeah, can you
answer
tell me
that
more about what the characteristics are that they're looking for?
Oh, I'm going to have to look it up, but I mean, it would be, I'm sure vegetation would be, I'm just typing this into my search bar as I say this, but vegetation would be part of it.
So vegetation, for example, would be quite easy, but then it depends on, what kind of dynamics they're looking for. So are they looking for, evapotranspiration? Are they looking for density? Are they looking for, use for food system impacts, for vegetative structure? And then that would be, again, a little bit more for some of the folks who are researching and have subgroups in the above project. But potentially, yes, I guess is the answer.
Okay, yeah. So yes, they're looking at wetlands, rocks, water, everything, and then connecting those to where people live, and so trying to build like a combined environmental and, I guess, socioeconomic profile of regions in Canada. So it may be part of the puzzle. Okay, good, because I did point them in your direction and wondered whether that was on the right track or not. So it might be. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, I'll ask Libby. And then we are going to be coming, I just found out this morning, we're going to be going to Old Crow at the beginning of February, and then probably coming down to Whitehorse. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see everybody and have some more conversations in person and that kind of thing. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I'm more than happy to receive emails and to have these conversations further. I really appreciate you all coming out. And like I said, I hope you're all staying warm and it's not too dark. And yeah, I would love also, if folks are interested in attending virtually the science team meeting in January, do let me know. And I'd be more than happy to share the schedule with you as soon as it comes out.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and talking to us today. Kimberly, really appreciate it. Really interesting to hear what's going on, and it's cool to hear from NASA, of course, right? It's neat that there's this collaboration happening in the Yukon. And I will pass on that video to you about Kristen Reed's presentation, and also on her contact info, because I see that someone posted it in the chat, so I grabbed that for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great lunch. Rest of your lunch. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.